A warm welcome to everybody. This is our Mysuru Talking Trails series. I'm Shubha Sanjayars, the chairperson of the Mysuru Book Clubs and the Literary Forum Charitable Trust. Today, in our Mysuru Talking Trails series, we have our own member, Maithili Rao. She has relocated from Mumbai to Mysore, which is the Mysore's game. She is a film critic and she is going to speak on her journey as an author. I'm not going to get into too much details because, as you listen to her, you're going to get the insight into her life. Thank you all. Maithili, please, it's all yours from now.
Hi, Shubha. And thank you for asking me to share my journey as an author. And it's, I must confess, I'm a late bloomer. Started writing only, in my late 30s. And I'm actually a student of literature. And I've went on a brief teaching stints in cities as apart as Ahmedabad, Kolkata, and Delhi. Then I got married and settled down in Bombay. And I think it is the best thing that happened to me in my life. Though I was a homemaker, not interested in teaching in Bombay, it's just a series of happenstances. And because I think I was at the right place at the right time and met the right people. And I think being at the right place and the right time makes for luck. And I've been lucky because it's just a series of happy coincidences that I met people and I was invited to write, which I never thought I would go into writing, because let me confess one thing. When you're a student of literature, grappling with T.S. Eliot calling Hamlet a artistic failure and other John Donne and metaphysical poetry, you get so intimidated that, okay, you've been reading the best and you give up all pretensions of writing, though I did flirt with a little poetry now and then. And then I thought at the most I'll be teaching, or at the back of my mind, journalism was an idea. But it just so happened that once you come to Bombay and the city sucks you in, and another great revelation for me, who's been traveling usually by car from place to place or a bus sometimes, the Bombay trains are a world, a microcosm of the city, and it's an experience that you only have to live through. Otherwise, it's difficult to experience it. And that's the beginning of my writing life, because there was a paper called the Free Press Journal, and on its Sunday edition, there was a fascinating article about travel by train and the people you meet, and it was generally confined to the general compartment, where very few women venture. And then I used to travel in ladies' thing, and then I find that there is another world here. And I wrote a rather longish letter to the editor, as a rejoinder or as a complimentary piece to the main article. And then the editor, I think, liked it, and he says, no, I don't want to publish it as a letter. Please make it a full-length article. So that's how my first published piece got, my published work. And then I used to write a few middles for the Times of India, and that was encouraging. But I think my life had a double track at this point, where I started writing for Free Press Journal, which is, by the way, the starting point for all freelancers and also some very well-known names like M.V. Kamath, who finally ended up as the editor of Illustrated Weekly, started his journey at the Free Press. Bal Thackeray was the cartoonist at the Free Press. So there has been some illustrious names associated with the paper. And I was asked to start, I was interested in films. And so that editor, whom I didn't know, but he seemed to like my writing. And then he says, okay, why don't you start writing on films? Hollywood films for us, because Bombay we used to have 2, 3 new films every week, and another freewheeling column about women, a woman's perspective. So when this was happening, it also happened that a person I met, Uma Dakuna. She's the pioneer of subtitling in India, actually. And she's a curator who selects films for festivals abroad, and she brings India connected films from abroad for our film festivals. And she was trying to subtitle Shyam Benegal's only Telugu film called Kondura. And then she was struggling with Telugu. And then my uncle, who happened to live in Bombay at the time, and he was with the news editor of the films division, he was very busy. He is a linguist, knows so many languages, though he's a Kannadiga by birth. So he deputed his young schoolgirl daughters to help Uma with us translating Telugu into English, and those girls gave up. And suddenly they thought that my mother tongue is Telugu, and I've studied, I can do the translation. They had that confidence, and they just told Uma, just try my cousin. And then I went and met Uma, and that's how another parallel track of my working life started, writing on films and again subtitling films. And Uma was so enthusiastic. She's asked me, where were you hiding all these days? So that started with Kondura. And as a kind of a omen to come, it was one of Smitha Patel's early films. And I finally ended up writing a book on Smitha Patel. So I don't know what kind of connections there are in life. Then I think I also know Kannada, in the sense that I can read Kannada, understand some of the Kannada. So Kannada films also became, subtitling, because there was always at the festivals, you have something called the Indian Panorama. The best of the films of the year are selected for viewing at the International Film Festival of India. And so there were Telugu, and that was the time for a lot of films, like Shankara Bharanam came, and then there were Girish Kasaravalli's films. So I got involved in subtitling. Then I thought, there is something about subtitling, because you're reading every dialogue, and then you're seeing the scene. The scene is described. You see that there is a camera movement, and the scene cuts from one set to another. So then I said, what you're seeing when you're reading the script and subtitling is actually the skeleton and the structure of a film. So I said, I must learn more about it. And I went to the FTII in Pune. They have a 1-month-long film appreciation course. So I went and joined that. I said, I was always interested in cinema and theater. So this I thought is in summer, my daughter would be at home, vacation and all that. So my husband took care of both the house and my daughter. So I went off to Pune for 1 month, and it was like cinema morning, noon and night, and analysis of films, and I exposed to world cinema. And I think if you want to write about films, you just can't confine yourself only to Indian cinema and the Hollywood film that you see. There is a huge world outside those films. So that's how I became like an avid member of so many film societies in Bombay. There was one that was devoted only to regional cinema. And then there was another one that brought European cinema. And so it was a very busy and fulfilling life, writing about Hollywood films and then doing the subtitling. It was a very busy, but actually a very, as I said, satisfying work. And I was working mostly from home. So that was an additional advantage. Then I think there's another thing happened. Then in the meantime, a paper called the Sunday Observer, which was India's first Sunday paper, was started. Vinod Mehta was the editor. And it took the city by storm. It became so popular. And one of my friends, a senior, who is almost like a mentor, the late Iqbal Masood, that was his pen name. His real name is F.R.G. Jilani, and he was the income tax commissioner of Bombay. And he was a film buff. And I used to meet him at press shows, and he took me under his wing, so to say. You must read this, you must see this. And we used to go to another institution in Bombay called the Strand Book Center, bookstall, where you could it's like a bibliophile's paradise. So then I think Mr. Jilani used to write about Indian films for Indian Express, and he used to do the Hollywood films for Sunday Observer. And the two papers were at war at that time, because the Sunday Observer was targeting Ramnath Goenka every issue, and the Indian Express told him, you choose which paper you want to write. And he says, Indian cinema is more, immediate and more relevant to us. So he says, he told Vinod Mehta, ask her, try Maithili out for the Hollywood films. And so there was that Sunday Observer column, which it was very widely read. I met people in other parts of India, oh, we read you in the Sunday Observer. So that again was something that was going, I think gave me exposure. And I think for a freelancer, recognition of your byline is something that matters. Because let me confess, you can't make a living out of freelancing. You have to have another source of an income. And even subtitling in those days wasn't paying all that much, but I used to enjoy doing the subtitling too. And then in the meantime, there's another happy coincidence when Germaine Greer, the author of The Female Eunuch, and whom I had read and admired, she came to Bombay and was holding a 10-day workshop on Shakespeare and his love of, and his idea of love and marriage. So there I met a wonderful person called Pamela Philippos, and she was a journalist. And at that time, we had two papers, the Eves Weekly and Star and Style, both being, under one imprint, one house, publishing house, brought them out. And they had a common editor, Gulshan Eve. But Pam was the senior assistant editor, and she had big ideas for the magazine. It was a weekly. And she says, no, I just want to go beyond fashion and cookery and, home decor and things like that. Want to introduce a legal column where women were going to be made aware of rights and what are the avenues that are open to them. And also a column on popular cinema, analyzing how women are portrayed in films. So it was called Images of Women. And I did this for about, somewhere started in early 80s, I think. I'm not very sure about the dates, because the Bhumika and all that started around 79. And I'd done the film appreciation course around the time, and then started looking at critically at how women are being portrayed in popular cinema, mostly Hindi, but sometimes if there was an interesting, like Nayakan came, and then there was some Malayalam films, and I used to see films at the film festivals. So, and editors were good. They said, okay, whatever you think it's worthwhile writing, please do. So I had that kind of freedom to choose what I would write about. And I wasn't doing this regular weekly reviews. I did that a few months later, but I was doing these two columns and subtitling. And somehow this Images of Women became popular, and I was invited to contribute chapters to books on cinema. And let me confess, I'm not a very disciplined writer. When there's a deadline, I'd be the next morning, it has to be sent. I would be working that evening and late into night, finishing the column. So, but then to write a book was, I thought I didn't have the discipline. There were too many distractions otherwise. So so there was all these books. One was Aruna Vasudev brought out Frames of Mind, and there was Chidanand Dasgupta, one of the senior most film critics whom I admire a lot, and he was a Satyajit Ray contemporary, and he brought out a volumes called Rasa, on which I contributed chapters on, again, my hobby horse, so to say, this women depiction of women in Indian cinema. And I used to read a lot of feminist literature, but my aim was not to write an academic essay, which is full of deconstruction jargon and all that, but it was to reach an intelligent reader and, dig into the subtext of a film, what is being said overtly and what is being implied covertly. So that was something that I enjoyed doing. And that's how I went on writing about women in cinema. So that led to seminars and that kind of also exposure without my becoming a film academic, because but then you do get exposed to film theories and all that. So I found that what started as a hobby became a passion and then became a profession. Seemed like a seamless organic growth, as if it was predestined that way. At the same time, I had made a rule for myself that I will not go and interview film stars or do any of this regular reporting on the film industry, what is being shot, what is happening. So because I said to myself that if I want to retain my objectivity as a critic, I shouldn't get too close to especially film stars, because they are stars for one reason, because they have that tremendous charisma, I think, to which you can unconsciously, submit. So, even almost seduced into that charisma. So I hardly ever met any film stars. And whenever I did a few interviews and things, it was mostly with directors like Shyam Benegal, Girish Kasaravalli. Then there would be other regional filmmakers, Janu Barua, and some Malayalam filmmakers. Those were the things I enjoyed doing. And I thought that I'll maintain my balance between writing about mainstream cinema and doing my justice to the art cinema, which was becoming like 70s and 80s, with the heyday of the parallel cinema movement. So that was like riding two horses. And at the same time, I think we were, as a tribe, as the film critics tribe, sometimes I feel now in hindsight that we were too indulgent towards even bad parallel cinema, because just as there is bad commercial cinema, there is also bad parallel cinema. So I remember Girish Karnad once saying that, okay, you take a camera, long shot, go follow a man walking on a village path, no dialogue, nothing. And so that becomes art cinema. So that was like actually summing up some of the more pretentious and bad art cinema. So it was like, a scene teeming with ideas, because even some things were happening in mainstream cinema, like a film like Bandit Queen comes out, and then there was always Amitabh Bachchan, the angry young man, to be analyzed. Does he reflect a disillusionment with society as it is? All these things were like very stimulating atmosphere to write about. And then there were the film festivals, which happened every year in Delhi, and that was a working holiday for me. You'd go there and then you'd be all the time talking films and absorbing so much of world cinema. And then also at the same time, you made friends whom you met once a year at the film festival. Like I would call them festival faces, and the conversations that we had with them. Even now, I may not recall the names of the people, but the wonderful conversations and the wonderful people I met are something that I'll never forget. So, and while this was happening, the festival sort of petered out somewhere in the mid 90s because every city started having its own film festival. In Bombay, it started MAMI, Mumbai Academy of the Moving Image, and I got involved in that, like selecting some of the films, Indian films, and then bringing out the festival catalog, which is not just about the films featured, but I tried to bring in first time how Bombay is portrayed in cinema. You know, I mean, that was my brief stint as an editor, commissioning and getting things being written by friends and unknown people also, you know, chasing them for the deadlines, keeping to the deadlines. That was also an enjoyable part. I think I did it for about 10 years till Mami became too big for a film society that started it, and the Bombay film industry took over and Reliance came into the picture. So I was out of it. I was there as only part of the many film enthusiasts who used to look forward to the festival every time. So I think it's also you were getting DVDs of all the foreign films. So I think even people stopped going to the film festival. So that somehow, you know, now I think you see everything on streaming platforms, including all your Oscar films and European films and all the regional films. So I miss that. I miss the bustle and the excitement of a film festival, but I guess that's also part of this journey. And while I was doing all these chapters on filmmakers and contributing to a whole lot of uh, magazines, including a couple of international publications. There was something called the Film Comment. It comes out, it's a bi-monthly from the Lincoln Center in New York. And I think they had a special section on Bollywood. So I'd done the lead piece called How to Read a Hindi Film, and also for the BFI website, wrote something, and International Film Guide. So a few international publications, and also jury duty, like I was on the National Film Awards 2008 or 2009, I forget, and also Documentary Film Festival, Children's Film Festival. So, and what I enjoyed most in this part was there's something called APSA, Asia Pacific Screen Awards. It's in Australia. So they call it the Eastern Oscars. It's meant for all Asian films. And for 3 years, I was associated with them, you know, called the Nominations Council. I used to see about 180 films. The DVDs would be sent, and we would meet in Australia and get a few nominations from there for the international jury, which was composed of filmmakers. So I think that gave me another exposure to so much of Chinese and Korean and Kazakh, and you know, you knew Russian films, you knew some of the Hungarian and those kind of films, but that much of exposure to Chinese cinema and Korean cinema, Malaysian cinema, cinema from Taiwan, it was again a very enriching experience. So it was exhausting watching about 180 films in about 3 months, you know, to do that. So, and that was it. And around the time, I think this whole How Did the Smitha Patel book come about, which has been well received. Actually, it was, I realized later that it was listed among the 25 best books by Goodreads. And so the Smitha Patel was an actor I always admired, but I'd never met her. So it is almost like unthinkable that you're writing about an actor without meeting her, because this, as I said, this was my policy of not to meet, make an effort to meet actors. Then I used to run into Shabana Azmi at many film festivals and all that. And once she had a retrospective again at the Lincoln Center. And I was asked to write a profile of her, of the films there. And she was also, that way very friendly. And she took some of my images of women column, those articles, because she was going to talk to some university students about how women are portrayed in Indian films, popular Indian cinema and all that. So she was like an exception. So was Om Puri, who was like one of the most down-to-earth, approachable men. But Smitha Patel has a history of how I came to write about it, because Aruna Vasudev, she's a very senior film critic and also editor of a magazine called Cinemaya, devoted almost exclusively to Asian cinema. And she was bringing out a series of books on film people who are no more. So she asked me to do a thing on Smitha Patel. I wrote out the first draft. I was unsatisfied because it was a little more of an elaborate monograph, not really a book. And my friends, many of them are published writers and all of them, they said, no, this is not, Smitha deserves a much bigger book. So any publisher will pick up. So I think I said goodbye to that particular series, and the book went into kind of a back burner for some time, till I think HarperCollins approached me, and then they knew that I was working on it. And so the book on Smitha Patel came about, and that was the time when I interacted with the film industry on a large scale, met sound recorders, met cinematographers, met Smitha Patel's makeup man, met all her directors and some of the co-actors. And that was actually, again, a very, very stimulating kind of an experience, meeting people and getting their perspective. And Smitha Patel's sister, the older one, Anita, she was of great help. And when doing the first book, the first draft, I'd met Smitha Patel's mother also, and a lot of her friends. So I think that's how the book came out, and it's called Smitha Patel, A Brief Incandescence. And people mistake it for a biography of Smitha Patel. It is not the conventional biography. I make it very clear in my introduction that it is more tracing her journey in cinema, and bit of her personal life enters in it, and what she meant to a whole lot of viewers, even years after she's no more. So that was it. And it had a big launch thanks to Anita, because when the book was being actually edited, I did the editing from the US, where I was at that time in that summer, and we wanted to release the book on Smitha Patel's 60th birthday. That was in 2015. And by the time I came back from the US, Anita had already dragged in Amitabh Bachchan to do the launch. So it became a huge event with Mr. Bachchan coming there becomes like a event. Otherwise, I was happy doing the launch in a bookshop with Shyam Benegal, who is actually one of the most wonderful people I've known in the film industry. So approachable and always, willing to, even anytime you call him up and want to clear something, he's there to answer your queries. And he's a delight to interview. Every interview that I've done with him, I must have done about 4 for different occasions. One never got published because it was to be for FTII, some anniversary thing. They ran out of money. This happens very much. This is part of a freelance film journalist life, because you engage in a project, everything is working. Then the person who's bringing it out I think, has no funds. The person who was backing it has withdrawn. Luckily, I haven't been subject to that kind of an experience, except on a couple of occasions. Otherwise, it's been a happy, fairly happy life, except the ones that when you, I think for about 1.5 years or so, I did the stint of it's a grind actually, of seeing the films and reviewing them by Sunday. You watch the films even on a Friday, rush home, and then do it and then send it off. By the time, luckily, email had come in, you didn't have to fax it and all that. So that is, you have to watch a lot of rubbish along with the good ones and sift one from the other. So I gave that up, and I've been happy being a freelancer. But, even I found that even as a freelancer, you develop a certain kind of loyalty. When I used to write for Eve's Weekly, the other rival women's publication was Femina. And Femina would say, write for that. Somebody, one of the junior assistant editors also would get in touch, said, would you do something? I said, look, that's a woman's magazine. This is a woman's magazine. I think my loyalty would be to Eve's Weekly, so I wouldn't do that. And people would say, that's not, you're a freelancer, the operative word being free. But I don't know, that was my personal predilection, so that I would stick by to the magazine that gave me this long stint of that column, that I think I did it for about 10 years or so, till the magazine got sold and it got shut down in a different format. And I think, I feel that I'm not that keen on writing any more of these biographical, because once you write about one film star, you get, I think publishers want you to do something on Madhuri Dixit, something on some other star and all that, but which is not my cup of tea. And so after coming to Mysuru, it's been pretty productive, because I've done a book called The Millennial Woman, Bollywood's New Brand, analyzing the film cinema of the last 20, 30 years, even from the 90s onwards, the change that has come in the portrayal of women. With this COVID situation, I don't know when the book will be out. It's with Oxford University Press. And actually coming to Mysuru has also resulted in updating another book called Janani, which my friend Rinki Bhattacharya had brought out. It's about mothers, daughters, and motherhood. And I had also written one essay on it in that collection. Then I think when I was here, part of the book clubs, one of my friends, Usha Srinath, part of her group, I had given her a copy of the book. She says, no, this is a book that we are all relate to. Let's discuss it in one of our clubs. And I told Rinki, I said, we are talking about your book. She was so excited, she came down for the meeting. And I think it sort of inspired her to rethink about the book. So I'm sort of drawn in as the editor, co-editor with that. And we have expanded the book, dropped many of the articles, got new writers from languages. Vaidehi, the very well-known Kannada novelist, poet, she's written, and so have others from other languages and other regions. So that's also another book under publication. So I'll be so happy to share that, because I think Mysuru Book Clubs is in a way directly, I think was the inspiration for this second volume of that book. So I must say that move from Mumbai, very happening city, as everyone says, but for the kind of writing I do, I don't have to be in Mumbai to write about films. Coming to Mysuru has been so wonderful. And I think what made Mysuru so stimulating and interesting now is the book clubs. And I think thanks to Shubha for that. And I must actually, I think I must confess a debt of gratitude to Shubha, because I just saw that there is a book clubs, and then I got in touch with her, and then she welcomed me with like open arms, and I made such, it's such good friends, like-minded people here, and I count my blessings after coming to Mysore. So that's my journey so far. I hope you found what I told you interesting.